Yo, what's up? It's someone that's someone, and welcome back to another story mix. Today, we're covering some of the funniest reports that have popped up on this channel, according to the comments, and some of these I did pick. During a trip, there's loads of things that can happen that can cause humor, or just be humorous when looking back on, most often due to bizarreness or someone's inability to function. Some of these trips have some of the wildest themes and backgrounds we covered, to the point of hysterics, while others showcase users acting dysfunctional and goofy as all can be. You'll just see. These are some classics. And before we get into this, I do want to know really quick, a lot of these were taken from various points in time, so the quality will vary. Also, I still am in the process of moving currently. Right now I'm at a temporary spot for about a month, so we should have some content rolling out here. But if things do get inconsistent, this is most likely why. But I'm sure you'll enjoy this one. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more, and without further ado, let's dive right into this. PCP with an orangutan. Hello all. I found a trip report on another forum about somebody doing PCP plus acid. Yes, PCP and acid. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if somebody else posted it here, but I'm just gonna post it, because it's not the kind of trip report you see every day. LOL. I can't stress enough that I did not write this report. I am not the irresponsible person who wrote this. I just posted it because I enjoyed reading it. Thanks. Just 2 days ago I acquired some PCP and 2 hits of acid. I'm well aware of the dangers of PCP, but I've tripped on acid and associatives multiple times, and shrooms once. I've taken acid in mild amounts with dissociatives as well. Since it was my first time using PCP, I tried to consume a low amount. I dropped the 2 hits of acid about 15 minutes after taking the PCP and went to a big park near me, which is a really nice park, tranquil. I thought this would be a good setting. I planned on just taking it easy, walking around the park, sitting down, or if need be, I could lay down in the grass. Everything was going fine until about an hour after dropping the acid. It took me about 15 minutes to get to the park, so I'd been walking for about 45 minutes. I was walking on the grass between the trees, just on the outskirts of a big open area of grass. I was very interested in the trees, stopping in front of them and just staring at them for long periods of time. I felt like I'd been in that park for maybe 15 minutes, probably because I was stopping to look at the trees for so long, and they were really interesting to me, so it didn't feel like a long time. I thought I noticed someone standing in the area of open grass, staring at me, but I wasn't paying attention. Eventually, I noticed they'd been staring at me for a long time, so I turned to see this person, and there, standing in the middle of the park, was a fucking orangutan. I stared for maybe 2 minutes, just taking in the sight. He would not stop staring at me and was starting to creep me out. So I began walking over to him. I was aware that I was tripping, but it looked so real that I just had to walk over to him to get a better look. When I got maybe 3 feet away and stopped, he motioned with his finger to come closer, just like a person would. I was very weary about getting any closer to it, but I could not resist hearing what a fucking orangutan had to say. He said in this really weird, soft voice, "I can speak. I want to speak to you. I've got something to say." I walked to its side, keeping maybe a half a foot away from him, but close enough to hear him speak. He said, and I shit you not, "I want to get fucked up." To me it sounded really stupid, like something out of a retarded teen movie, but I decided that this was my trip. I should go with what happens on it, and not avoid its most compelling features. I started to feel really far gone as we walked towards a bench. I don't remember the details of what happened next, just that I gave the orangutan PCP. I can remember thinking that I'd gone back in time and met some primitive form of man. Next thing I remember after this is being in a bar and telling the bartender to get the orangutan whatever he wants. I think I'd somehow forgotten that I was tripping at this point. I just wanted to get fucked up with the orangutan. Maybe half an hour later of doing shots with an orangutan, some guys at the other end of the bar started yelling shit at him. He went over to them, and a fight broke out. I rushed over, and in the middle of the brawl, throwing punches at the dudes who were yelling at my orangutan, the orangutan started throwing punches at me. I was thinking, why the fuck is this orangutan hitting me? I got him fucked up like he wanted, spent a shitload of money getting him whatever drinks he wanted, and gave him PCP. The cops arrived, both me and the orangutan were arrested, and I blacked out. I came to in a jail cell, and then I was taken out to be booked since I was too fucked up to be booked when they brought me in. Well, it turns out that orangutan was not really an orangutan at all. Did I hallucinate the whole thing, I hear you ask? No, it turns out this orangutan was a fucking retarded kid. Yes, I gave PCP to a retarded kid and got him drunk. I had no PCP left on me, but we were both drug tested. So, I have been charged with giving drugs and alcohol to a mentally infirm minor. Don't do PCP, just don't do it. I don't want to sound like I'm spewing some DEA bullshit, but PCP is definitely a drug which is not worth it. Comedy of errors. When I was in high school back in the day, I didn't smoke pot or drink. I was a day tripper to a T. I used to try to go after the third plateau whenever I had time and supplies to do it. One special Friday, me and my friends Andy and Mike were hanging out, and Andy busted out a cough syrup we had never seen before. It was Etizolam. Andy said it tasted like oranges, and Mike agreed, but I was suspicious. I had my own bottle of Robo on me, so I didn't need it, and their bottle was so tiny. They explained it was more powerful than normal syrup and had twice the dex per milliliter, which is kinda true, except it doesn't react hard. It just takes longer. I gave it a taste and told them I was pretty sure that orange stuff was bullshit, and I downed my own bottle of the classic normal Robitussin. A lot of people have a hard time chugging this gross stuff, but I was always able to down it and not even flinch. It was a talent, but not a good one. Anyways, the Etizolam bottle was so damn little. I haven't seen one that size since. Andy and Mike hung out with me for an hour, and then got fed up because they felt nothing. So we were going to get some more at Walmart. We didn't have money, and I was in no condition to try shoplifting at that point. I was tripping now. When they went inside, I went to the soda machines in the lobby vestibule and considered my options of drink for the night. I didn't have any change and just stared at the vending machines for a long time. Once in a while, checking my pockets for money, as if it would come out hiding since the last time I searched for it a couple minutes ago. Andy and Mike came back to the lobby, walking fast, telling me, "We need to go. Right now." I responded, "I need to get a drink first." And they were like, "No, we need to leave. They're after us." We ran to the car and hit the road. On the way back, they were freaking out saying, "RoboCops, we're after them." They did not mean the robot from the movie RoboCop. They thought whoever was after them were like specialized agents who busted people specifically for DXM. It was probably just asset protection security, if it was anyone at all. They were so convinced that we were being chased by. They started unloading all the stolen medicine and downed as much as they could before we were going to throw them out of the car to get rid of it. Mike threw me a box of Coricidin and another bottle of Robitussin to the back seat. I took 2 blister packs of Coricidin and downed half the Robo and put the rest in my pocket. Mike was throwing shit out of the window frantically, while Andy drove, chugging as much Etizolam as he could. Mike was even throwing out unrelated stuff, like Andy's CDs, food, and magazines he had in his car. I remember specifically Mike screaming like a girl when he threw a bottle out and it hit a road sign, and he heard it hit the sign with a loud crash. They thought we were being followed by RoboCops, and their panic got even worse as we pulled up to some train tracks that we had to stop at and wait for a train to pass. "They're not going to take me alive," Mike was promising. "I'm going down shooting." I was like, "You have a gun?" And he was like, "No." And then he asked Andy to borrow his gun. Andy owned no gun. None of us ever had a gun. When the train finally was gone, we drove towards Mike's house, but they were sure absolutely that the RoboCops would be waiting there for us. All the while, I was pretty damn sure they were just wigging out. I also didn't fully understand the idea of RoboCop. I thought they were talking about the movie one and didn't put it together at the time. We drove to where no one would find us. It was a graveyard. What a wild place to go while tripping. It didn't take but 5 minutes after we got there that we lost track of Andy. I don't know where the fuck he went, so it was me and Michael just hiding behind some gravestones. He told me about what happened in Walmart. They went to get Delsum, but then they noticed that there was Robitussin cough gels now. These were actually new. They were ecstatic about the discovery. This was something that hadn't been on the market before, at least not in our time. Unfortunately, the packaging it came in confused the hell out of them. It wasn't like a simple box. It was like a really thin crinkly loud plastic pressed in cardboard around a bottle. They weren't able to break it with much discretion, and people saw what they were doing, and they wigged out and ran the hell away. I told Michael he was full of shit, and there was no such thing as cough gels. There actually was, though. The only thing like it before we saw was Dextromethorphan, which was 50 milligrams of nothing but DXM, no extra ingredients. But that was really hard to find. Mike's demeanor changed to somewhat angry after a while. We were both starting to hit the third plateau, wherein the hallucinations start happening. I had only experienced it once up to this point. Mike hadn't yet. He was different. He was defensive all of a sudden, muttering and cussing out a flower wreath thing someone left for their dead loved ones. Something to the effect of, "Man, don't you shake that hatchet at me, motherfucker. I know we stole your land and stuff, but that was a long time ago. What the fuck do you expect me to do about it?" I grabbed him to get his attention, asking him what the fuck he was talking about. He said the flower wreath was a Native American. The ring of flowers looked like a feathered headdress to him. I told him to chill and told him to just apologize and shake the Indian's hand and he'll forgive you and go away. Mike pushed the flowers over instead. He realized they were just flowers when he did. All of a sudden then, headlights blasted on, blinding us. Not from Andy's car, but from another car. It was at this time we decided to leave. We were both in the zone and started walking back to Andy's car. The headlights from the other car was blinding, and I fumbled around blindly trying to find the door handle of the car. When I opened up the door and jumped in, I almost landed hard on Andy, who was in the backseat floorboards, hiding. I don't know when Andy got back in the car. Mike jumped in the passenger seat, yelling to Andy, "We need to get out of here. Let's go." And Andy would be like, "Yeah, let's go." Mike would go, "Come on, man, let's go." And Andy would shout, "I know, let's go." An exchange pretty much like that went back and forth for another minute before Andy remembered he was the driver and had to get up front. Important PSA break. There are some things you aren't supposed to do when you're tripping on DXM. Obvious stuff. Don't hang out extensively with your parents. Don't try to have sex. Don't cook on the stove. Don't handle dishes you want to keep. Don't take a math test. All these are secondary. First and foremost, you should never ever ever drive if you are messed up on anything. It not only endangers your life, but it endangers everyone else's. There is nothing so important to risk it. Get in trouble, come back late, get arrested. Do anything else. Just don't drive. It's not worth it. End of PSA break. So Andy is driving, Mike is wigging and wanting to fight stuff, and I'm so vexed I can barely muster the will to talk. I just watched everything happen most of that night. I was feeling all the body sensations. I was hot, I was numb, my joints felt fake or something. I had light tracers too. This must have been my second time going this far, and it wasn't very dramatic. I didn't see many visuals at all, unless I closed my eyes. I really only hallucinated, like a lot one time, and a little bit this time, but after, never again. But that's another story. This one, I'm just sick, and everyone was wigging out, and the music on the car stereo sounded like it was in fast forward, even though it wasn't. If you're wondering who was in the other car that blinded us and scared us out of the graveyard, me too. No one from the car talked to us. I don't know if it was a groundskeeper or what, but they didn't pursue us. Mike asked who was in the other car, and Andy asked him, what other car? Mike said the one that was behind us. Andy just looked at him funny and said, that was a train, dude. It was at this point I realized Andy is vexed too. We drove like 10 miles per hour back to Michael's house, and we were getting ready to get in trouble and accepting the intimate discipline. Mike asked Andy what time it was, and Andy looked at his dashboard clock that read 1:55. We were supposed to be home by 11 p.m. Mike was like, well, fuck, I guess it's over now. And we stutter marched into his house, ready to feel the wrath of the parents. What Andy didn't seem too concerned with telling us, his dashboard clock was stuck on 1:55. It never changed. It was broke that way. We came in at 10:30. Mike's parents asked us how our night was, and I responded really loudly, as if I was talking to a deaf or foreign. It was good. We will play Nintendo now. And they said okay, and that there was a pizza in the kitchen. Thank you, but we will play Nintendo now. His mom told me okay, but don't make a lot of noise, because everyone's going to bed. We played GameCube. At the time, it just went on sale for $99 and came with a Zelda collection for free. And we were playing the first Zelda, but we couldn't get anywhere in it because we were so disoriented. At some point, Andy's cell phone started ringing loud as hell. It was a little Nokia thing, really slick looking for its time, but it really wasn't at all. We were like, dude, answer your phone. No response. I threw his shoe at him and got his attention, and he looked at me like I just punched him or did him wrong or something, and was like, what? Dude, answer your phone. Andy picked up his shoe and put it to his ear and was like, hello? After that, we stayed up trying to see if the news reported on what Mike and Andy thought was a high-speed chase when they stole a shit ton of medicine from Walmart and sped off. I was almost disappointed we didn't, even though I knew for a fact we wouldn't have been on there. We stayed up all night, letting the dungeon music from the first Zelda play all night long as we just sat there doing nothing, while Link on the screen was doing nothing too. At some point, Andy commented Mike's parents must be pretty cool to let him have a poster of two naked chicks making out. I'm pretty sure it was a Lord of the Rings poster and featured Gandalf and Aragorn predominantly in the picture. I guess he saw them as chicks. I don't know. All I know is we were so exhausted physically and mentally after all these seeming unproductive actions, but everyone felt like we ran a marathon or something. That's pretty much the only eventful experience I've ever had. Most all others were just laying around playing video games or listening to music or getting busted or something. There were a couple little events, but I think this night was the only one worth talking about. It might seem funny and awesome at some parts, but we were taking a lot of big risk, and we were making really big mistakes that could have hurt us very badly and ruined our lives. Well, I think the three of us did ruin some of our lives. I am somewhat a chemically dependent drug addict that has no addiction to one thing. Andy turned out going to a mental hospital a lot, and for some reason, I do not know why, he was castrated at some point. Michael got caught with Andy stealing a few weeks later, and luckily the store didn't press charges. He was grounded for a few weeks, and then he came back, not too enthused, to get back to mischief. So he strained himself out the best. I got busted a lot after that. It wasn't a good idea to do this stuff. I wouldn't recommend it. Anyways, that's about it. Thanks for your time. Crackhead. I used to be a crackhead that slept at stores in the pillow section, but one night I got high beyond belief. It started out me walking to the local Meijer as usual at like 12 in the morning. I walked in, went to the cold and cough section, and grabbed 2 bottles of Robitussin cough gels and took all of them, and proceeded to walk around for a bit. After a bit, I could feel the come up of the DXM, and as always, I went to the alcohol section and grabbed 4 shots of Fireball. I slammed all of them and went to get some Duster, and when I did it, I could feel the DXM getting me to the point of a blackout. It felt as if I had went insane and lost my soul at that point. My memory was blurry. I just remember feeling like a crackhead and ended up sleeping in the pillow section. Also, having a shady memory of puking in the pillow aisle. After I woke up, I walked home, being still high as hell on the DXM. And being locked out of the house, I went and slept in the trunk of my mom's car. I hallucinated still being in the store, in my ego death, and my mom didn't even know I was in the car. She drove around with me in the trunk, and after what felt like a couple of hours, I opened the back seat and came out saying, "I lost my soul in the store," and apparently scared the crap out of my brother, who was scared of me for 2 weeks after. To this day, I still feel soulless, as I probably have psychosis from DXM, as I have been doing it since I was 16 and was 17 at the time. A late summer night's dream. I like to consider myself a very knowledgeable and for the most part responsible drug user. I know my limits, and very rarely do I push them to the breaking point of blacking out and losing control of my bodily functioning. Every other time but this, I was drinking alcohol. But on this particular experience, I trip harder than I ever tripped on LSD, mushrooms, DXM, salvia, etc. I've experimented in large amounts with most substances I've used, but on my first encounter with morning glory, I lived a dream for 4.5 hours and woke up 15 hours later, only to find myself in my roommate's swim shorts and my other roommate's dress shirt flipped inside out. Never have I heard of anything this bizarre and just fucking weird than what happened to me 2 nights ago when a few of my friends came back from a Chili Peppers concert in Denver and saved me 1 pod from a moonflower. I've wanted to try morning glory for a while, so when my friends told me about their crazy trip, I seized the opportunity. I knew that if I wanted to extract the chemical, it would take a while, and I've heard people eating them and still tripping, so that's what I decided around 7:40 p.m. I cut open the pokey green pod and found not even 100 bright orange seeds. I thought that they might need to be dried, but since S-Dog, Gassman, and Quasnout tripped balls in Denver by the same means of ingestion, I figured I would be in the clear. I scooped all the seeds into my mouth and munched them up for about 5 minutes until I was left with a nasty mush and swallowed it all down with Gatorade. With the amount that I took, I never expected that before I finally lay to rest that night, I would be wandering outside of my townhouse, naked, or taking sips off my bottle of Nivea aftershave. 20 minutes after ingestion, I noticed a slight difference in my perception. I was only able to notice the come up, which didn't stop. I never felt the come down because I was asleep during it. At first, I was really pleased with how I was feeling, but after about an hour of sitting around, watching TV, and bullshitting with my friends, I began to get irritated, partly because the effects weren't really increasing as much as I expected, and partly because I had to piss and couldn't. For the next hour, I started getting a little worried because I felt like I needed to take a leak. But despite all of my attempts of turning on the sink, flushing the toilet, and pushing like hell, I couldn't muster more than a few drops until 10:30-11 p.m., when I felt absolutely horrible from having dry mouth and started to feel almost nauseous. I also noticed my skin was a bright red color and felt extremely warm. Because of the low intensity of effects, I really didn't feel like being awake if I was just going to feel like shit all night and not experience anything more than a mild shift of perception, loss of some motor skills, and a few tracers. So, I decided to hit the hay early, and amazingly, I was able to piss just before I went to bed. I took 5 milligrams of melatonin and laid down feeling uncomfortable and restless, but eventually I succumbed to sleep, to the last of my conscious recollection. When I awoke at 7 p.m. the next day, I felt refreshed and more awake than I felt in a long time. The night before, I had the most vivid dreams I've ever had. During these dreams, there are several reoccurring themes that keep happening to me. Every time I would see Dirty D's face, he would ask me if I was doing alright, and I couldn't understand why he would ask me that, because I felt fine. So I look at him and say, yeah, of course, why wouldn't I be fine? I think he asked me that maybe 4 to 5 more times, getting more concerned each time, but every time I gave the same reply, or some other variation of the same. Another thing that kept pissing me off was that I fell down probably 5 times. All I remember is walking down my staircase, losing my balance, and stumbling/sliding before I would get to the bottom. I can remember one occurrence when I took 2 steps and rolled the rest of the way down the carpeted staircase. I don't remember any pain. I would also try to sit down wherever it was I thought I was, but only hit the ground with a hard thud. I think I did that twice, looking around afterwards for the person who pulled my chair out, only to find that there wasn't even a chair and I was sitting on the floor outside my kitchen. This last reoccurring theme that happened was the one that freaked the fuck out of me and really brought me back to reality. I remember talking to quite a few people throughout the whole experience, but not remembering what we were talking about most of the time. 3 times I was standing outside somewhere during the daytime and talking to about 10 to 15 people, recognizing only some, about God knows what. All 3 times I would notice one person sticking out in the crowd, and as I paid more attention to him, he became clearer and clearer. He was tall and had dark hair. He looked so familiar, but I just couldn't think of who this person was. When he was only a few feet away from me, I could tell that his lips were moving, and as I watched, I noticed his lips were moving as I was talking. Suddenly, it dawned on me like a wave of every feeling, good and bad, that I could feel. I was surprised, stunned, speechless, happy, scared, pissed off at myself, absolutely confused, and yet realized exactly what had happened. I was standing, shirtless in my bathroom, talking to myself in the mirror. I repeated this 3 times, getting more upset after each time of realizing what I was doing again. Throughout my dream, it seemed there was no chronological order to the events that were happening. Sometimes I would be standing outside on a grassy field or in a parking lot. Other times I would be in my apartment fiddling with something or standing in my closet looking for nothing. On one of my visits to the bathroom, B-Rod, one of my roommates, was watching me as I washed my hair with what I thought I did at the time was my bottle of aftershave. I only managed to rinse a little out of my hair before I dried it off with a towel. So, as my hair dried, it became hard and crusty. As B-Rod is still staring at me, I pick up the real bottle of aftershave, and just as the taste starts to fuck with my mouth, B-Rod takes it from me and scolds me like a dog. No! And I'm dumbfounded and sincerely clueless as to why B would do that, as if he did something wrong. The last major event I clearly remember was only a second's worth, but it was pretty significant. The only thing I recall is standing outside my walk-in closet, and there were people everywhere in my room. I looked at my friend Gaffsman, and he's yelling/laughing at me to put some clothes on, and I don't pay any attention to him at all. There are other minor details about my dreams that I will touch on, but when I woke up the next day, this is all I could consciously remember. Other than the vivid and weird dreams, I didn't think the morning glory did anything special, until I consulted my roommates. I woke up to S-Dog kicking the futon and told him about the crazy dreams I had the night before. After I described most of the clearer parts of my dream, S-Dog was already laughing his ass off as he stopped me and told me I wasn't dreaming. When I thought the dreams I actually remembered were fucked up, I was speechless, in disbelief, and almost frightened at the insanity that actually took place. Somehow, my entire trip, I was sleepwalking. I was told by 8 or so of my friends that I was incoherent and mumbling gibberish until almost 4 a.m., and even when I would manage to put a comprehensible sentence together, I would say something completely irrelevant to anything they were asking me. S-Dog was yelling at me for throwing a whole roll of TP in the toilet, and I responded, "I told you I didn't take your clothes out of the dryer and set them on fire." Throughout the night, I continued to go to the restroom, and as my friends and roommates began to understand the extent of how fucking gone I was, they started following and babysitting me a little closer. I was told at one point I was standing in the corner of my downstairs bathroom talking to 2 of my friends, Seven and Gumby. Another time in the upstairs bathroom, as I kneeled on my hands and knees and stared into the toilet bowl, I told Filthy, "I'm playing Need for Speed Most Wanted, and it's not good because the cops keep getting me."
All throughout the night, I was seen moving my hands like I was playing with something, putting something together, or holding some object, even though I had nothing. I can see myself doing that because I've woken up at nights thinking I'm holding something and search for it in my bed until I realize I'm dreaming. The only thing I remember that night similar to playing with objects that weren't there was when I was lying in bed, no clue of what time it was, and I thought I had a cigarette in my hand. But when I couldn't find it, I searched my carpet frantically, looking for the butt, thinking I was going to set my room on fire. Earlier in the night, I was standing at my kitchen counter, messing with nothing, and my roommate, JP, asked me what I was doing. Apparently, I told him he needed to put a condom on an empty paper towel roll. I also told my friend Cece, I need a pipe, but you can never find any good pipes in Africa. I've never been out of the US. I was also talking to Cece in my closet by myself. Talking gibberish to random objects and people who weren't there was probably enough for my friends to handle, but as the night grew closer to morning, I began to lose grip of physical reality, throwing judgment out the window and functioning only on extremely short-term memory. I was told I could halfway answer questions if I only needed to say one word, but any more than that and I would add my own shit, according to B-Rod, traveling off on nonsense tangents and losing track of where I was and what I was doing. The night really started to go bad when I decided to take a shower. I don't remember a lot about it, but I can recall getting in and out of the shower with my clothes on quite a few times. I remember because I kept hitting my feet and shins on the metal tracks of the shower doors and stumbling forward due to the change in ground height. When I finally got in the shower naked, I stood there just peering over the shower doors at my friends, not saying a word and only rinsing my lower half. Then got out, shampooed my dry head, and washed it out in the sink. For the next 20 minutes, I was completely oblivious to the fact that I was butt-ass naked. Luckily everyone, except Filthy, who I still can't remember even being at my house, and Gassman had gone to a party. They were both sitting in my room when I got out of the bathroom, and I walked in dragging my towel. I went into my closet to change and came out, still naked and completely in another world. Gaffsman and Filthy were laughing their asses off at me and telling me to put some clothes on. Something finally must have registered, because I bent down, grabbed my invisible boxers at my ankles, and pulled them up, snapping the invisible, elastic waistband to make sure they were on. I was told that not once was I really aware that I was even fucked up. I walked around and did whatever I wanted without giving a fuck about what other people thought. I honestly don't remember one conversation or anything out of the ordinary in my behavior, but in actuality, my behavior was anything but ordinary. After wandering my room naked for a while, I walked out of the room and downstairs, leaving my friends crying in laughter. It wasn't until they heard the front door close when they realized how truly out of my fucking mind I was. I walked halfway out in the street until Filthy finally grabbed me and got me to walk inside. Once safely inside, they convinced me to put some clothes on, so I just grabbed some I saw on the ground in front of the door. There isn't too much I remember after that, but I do remember JP coming back from a party with a bunch of people. Filthy, Gassman, and I were sitting on the couch when they arrived, and all I really remember is JP complimenting me on my clothes and laughing at how ridiculous I looked, out of my mind in blue flower swimming trunks and an unbuttoned inside-out dress shirt. I remember the clothes pretty clearly because I didn't understand why I was wearing them, but I accepted it anyways. I remember looking down at myself and noticing my shirt was unbuttoned a couple times, but because it was inside out and I didn't realize it, the shirt was simply impossible for me to button up. My shorts also confused me quite a bit, but I didn't worry too much about it because I thought I was dreaming. S-Dog said I was playing with my drawstrings a lot, and I remember it, but at the time, I thought it was my cigarette and something was wrong with it. I'm not entirely sure when I finally passed out. I thought I went to bed before midnight, but apparently I was up until 4 a.m. or so. The trip was so completely different from anything I've ever experienced. There was no spiritual enlightenment or grand answers of understanding at the end of it all. Only a horrific feeling of confusion and a much greater appreciation and respect for the power of nature and everything it creates. To be under the control of a force that powerful and not even realize it had affected me is truly humbling. I have full intentions of trying morning glory again someday, but I'm sure as hell going to dry out the seeds this time and definitely not use moonflower, because I'm fairly sure that was the reason I was so out of my mind. I can handle traveling to weird organic worlds of spontaneous colorful forms and crazy creatures because I'm aware of and understand what I'm perceiving and know I'm physically passed out in some unsightly, embarrassing position. But when I get pissed off at my roommates for stopping me from drinking aftershave, don't have the slightest idea that I'm even walking around naked and can't even recognize my own face in the mirror, I know I've overstepped some fucked up boundaries of consciousness.
God mode. This is a recounting of two separate events involving 3-MeO-PCP, methamphetamine, and LSD. At the time of the first event, I probably weighed 130 pounds and was quite addicted to meth, so that was constantly at play in my system. I was probably doing half grams per day on average. I was pretty unhealthy. Just to give a general idea on body type and stuff. Anyway, I had been at a friend's place doing speed for at least a couple of days, so sleep deprivation was also at play. But we had also gotten some 3-MeO-PCP from one of my favorite vendors, and we had been doing tiny little bumps every now and then. We had a significant dissociative tolerance from constant use of 3-MeO and other dissos, so we had good experience with our limits on 3-MeO through trial and error and several uncomfortable experiences. So we were spun and 3-MeO'd up, having a blast. I would say I had probably taken 10 to 15 milligrams near the time of the incident. Definitely a high dose, I know. Then a mutual friend of ours comes over. We spend time hanging out, doing speed, and bullshitting. After a few hours, he decides he's gonna leave, so I ask him for a ride back. Before we leave, I trade him some Etizolam for some of his acid because I wanted to trip that night at home. I get 3 hits, 2 of one batch and 1 of another. We get in his vehicle and head out towards my place. On the way home, I drop all 3 hits and we have a nice chill drive. He's one of my best friends and I am extremely high, so I'm in a great mood. He drops me off at my place and we say our farewells. I go inside and I can feel the acid creeping up on me, 30 minutes in on the acid. I turn on the TV, which only has very basic cable, and it goes on to an infomercial. I decide that I need to get some more comfortable clothing. At this point, the acid's starting to get into more full swing. 1 hour in. By this time, I've decided to change clothes. Things are starting to become real intense. I'm becoming confused and keep forgetting what I'm doing. In the process of getting changed, I forget what I'm doing while naked. I abandon getting clothes on because I can't remember what I was doing. So I'm naked, kind of roaming my house in confusion, with brief moments of clarity. In one of those moments, I realized that I was naked and super fucked up, and should probably close the blinds at least, so no neighbors would see. 1 hour, 15 minutes in. After closing the blinds, I sit down and take a half milligram of Etizolam, in hopes that it may prevent any unpleasant feelings and perhaps keep me from losing my mind too much. I begin watching the infomercial. I have the feeling that it's trying to indoctrinate me. I become stressed and decide to try to let myself be programmed by the TV in hopes that it will be nice and easy and painless. By the way, I only have a bandana on around my neck. I feel trapped by it and start to try to take it off, and the infomercial begins to rap along to my progress on getting it off. Finally, I get it off, and things feel happier. After this, time becomes impossible to keep track of or even guess about. I realize that I'm more twisted than I have ever been, and I begin to feel that I might be discovered in my condition and decide to go upstairs to my room. I lay down on the floor, realize that that's incorrect for a human to do. then after some struggle, lay down in my bed. It's pitch black in my room because I didn't turn the light on. I lay down for what feels like hours. I begin to see some light outside my window, which probably was there the whole time from a street light or the stores down the street. I begin to feel worried that I might be found naked on my bed, which would also be peculiar for someone to do. So I finally figure out how to turn on my light, and I try to put on a sweatshirt. After fumbling with that for several minutes, I realize that it will not happen. I begin to get the feeling that something is beckoning me to open my door. At this point, I am feeling like I am basically in my little shell of my mind. I open the door and feel lighter. I realize that I opened the door, metaphorically, to the world. I have always struggled with being open with people, and here I was, stripped down and having just opened a little bit to the world. Then I begin to have a feeling/sense, an entity telling me to come outside. I stumble down the stairs to the front door. I grip the handle and feel myself being gently urged to open the door. I open it, close it behind me, and stand on the front porch. I get the feeling that I have stripped myself bare and am finally open to the world, and have the sense that I am now the second coming of Christ. I'm an atheist, but in my deluded state, everything made complete sense. All my struggles in life, depression, anxiety, drug addiction, pain, all suddenly had a purpose, a reason for all I had gone through. I felt an entity/had a feeling that I needed to get to people, so that everyone would know that everything is going to be okay, that I had signaled the end of war, and there would be only peace and prosperity. I sprinted down the street, through a field, and some blackberry bushes, lots of thorns, also made a lot of sense with the whole Jesus thing, kept running at full speed, onto the main road, down that, across traffic, through traffic, to the local 7-Eleven. I then was just outside of the store, proclaiming at the top of my lungs that we had done it. It was over, and peace has finally been attained. But very quickly, the police showed up and arrested me. Yet, I thought they were doing it for my good as Christ, and they were going to take me wherever I needed to be. As I was arrested, they asked if I had taken drugs. I said yes. Well, more yelled. I could not control my voice. I could only yell and scream, and my voice was shuddering. They asked if I had taken acid. Yes. Meth? Yes. PCP? Yes, all of it. I was very remorseful, and felt bad for being the savior, and still having fucked up, but felt good that everything was out in the open. They put me in the back of the squad car, in handcuffs, and started to drive me to the hospital, I believe. But I believed, back and forth, that either they were going to sacrifice me so that I could die for people's sins and peace would be attained, or that I would be united with Gaia and we would become a complete God. I believed that they were asking if I understood my rights and what was going to happen, and I think they were asking if I was ready for where I will be taken, which I just kept saying, "Yes, I am ready." By this point, I am going in and out of blackouts. We roll up to the hospital, and there is this blinding light, and I am suddenly in the hospital. Before fading out, I look over and see my reflection in the railguard of the hospital bed, and I believe I have completed my quest. I black out, and then suddenly I am being processed through jail. I then come to again in my jail cell, uncertain of whether all of that had actually happened. My mom posted my bail and took me to her place in the town where she lives. I was terrified of the withdrawal and depression I may have to deal with since I will have stopped my meth habit, so when I grabbed my stuff from my place, I also grabbed my 3-MeO PCP and Deschloroketamine. I spend the week doing both of those and trying to process everything. At the end of the week, my mother and I get into a very unpleasant fight, and I call a friend to come pick me up so I can be in a better place until I can get a ride home, which I eventually do from my friend's who I used meth with. So because of the fight I had with my mom, I have the fuck it's. I get to my friend's place, angry and not caring, and immediately start getting spun. I do that for a day and a half, then my friend with the acid shows up, and I ask if I can test his new batch. We both drop an unknown amount, didn't have a dropper, of an unknown potency batch. Terrible decision, I know, especially on the exact same mixture of things that screwed me up before. But we drive to another friend's house so my friend can sell some weed. While over there, psychosis starts to creep up on me again. I deal with it fine, and then we leave. We head back to our other friend's place, and I really begin to get concerned about his driving because he is also on acid. I begin to get the hallucinations, both visual and audio. We stop briefly as I am having a freak out, but resume our journey and make it to our friend's place. I'm too fucked up to stay, so I tell my friend to take me home. We make it a bit away, and I get a God complex. I believe that I am God and control everything that happens. I begin to hear voices. My friend stopped at a stop sign, and I bolted from the car. I was much too fast for him to process what had happened, and I began to run back towards our other friend's place. I ran probably close to 2 miles, ran through a field, fell in it, rode around in a ditch, got up. Then I ran down the road, over someone's fence into their backyard, out their gate, down another street, to what I thought was my friend's place. Well, it wasn't my friend's place. I kept trying to get into the door, which was locked. I kept bumping into the door, hearing my friend's voices as clear as day, which was a hallucination, making me think they were just messing with me. Eventually I gave up, turned towards the parking lot, and saw vehicles. I thought one of them was my friend's vehicle. Looking back, it definitely wasn't, but I tried getting into the car. I kept hearing his voice coming from inside the car, once again, thinking he just kept fucking with me. Eventually, I gave up and kept spinning in circles and bouncing between the 2 cars. Then I fell down. By the way, it was raining and cold this whole time. I fell into a puddle between the cars and laid there twitching and rolling around. Suddenly, there were police and EMTs. They kept asking me questions, but I couldn't remember anything or how to use words. I kept in mind that I had taken LSD, and I meant to say 25, as in LSD 25, but I got it mixed up and kept saying 21 over and over to all the questions they asked me. The EMTs and police were talking about me off to the side as I sat on the back of the ambulance. They kept saying that they thought I was homeless, a tweaker, a junkie, to which I would look over and desperately say, no, sadly. I felt hurt that they would act like that. I mean, what did it matter what was going on with me? I needed help. Anyway, they eventually got me on the gurney and into the back of the ambulance. I blacked out for a few, then came to whomping like I had been on nitrous. I then had the delusion that everything that had happened had been a hallucination from a dental procedure, and following that one, I thought that years ago I had ordered 2CI online and that I had been hospitalized back then, and that I was only 13 or 14 again. Then I blacked out and was in the hospital with the delusion that I was an ancient being and a medical mystery. Eventually, the psychosis faded away, and I came to realize that I had just done it again. I was told my mom was coming to see me and pick me up. I had the hospital turn her away because I was so ashamed. Eventually, my friend called the hospital and came to get me. He picked me up and took me home. Those experiences were the craziest experiences of my life. They were also life-changing. I have since gone into outpatient treatment and am now 70 days clean from all those chemicals. I have learned tons of tools and learned to realize when I'm making poor decisions. I have also become incredibly healthy. I'm actually very happy that I went through all of that. I have overcome depression, and a lot of my anxiety has lessened. My spirituality has grown, not in a religious way, but my connection with the universe and love compassion, and understanding, and things are going great. Well, I hope you enjoyed my experience and take something from it. Peace and love, people. Peace and love. The Jenkem experiment. Pickwick. Okay, today I set it up and put the bottle in the hot sun. My friend took pictures of all the steps. First I shit in the bottle, then pissed in it. I took a balloon and stretched it over the top to catch all the gases. Now I will wait a few days and hope the balloon fills up. Hey everybody, time for an update. The bottle is on my porch at the moment. All day I let it sit in the hot sun, and surprisingly, the balloon has actually inflated a little bit. It is kinda standing up and has some gas in it. The shit on the bottom has bubbles floating on it. No pictures though. My mom took the camera to my brother's prom. Thanks for your support, everyone. Tomorrow, if the balloon is big enough, then I'm gonna do some Jenkem. I took some pictures of the progress. The shit on the bottom has seemingly turned to sludge and mixed with some piss to make a layer on the bottom. The layer is softer than just shit. I swished the bottle around and it moved. Above that one, there's a layer of dark piss that has some shit in it. There is a steady stream of tiny bubbles moving up from the shit sludge layer through this layer. The balloon on top has inflated more since last night. I put a new label on the bottle because the last one got rained on. The glass inside the bottle has a coating of water from evaporation inside the bottle. Well, today, I finally did it. I became probably the first person in America to huff his own shit gas. No video though. Sorry, no camera. I hope you are not too disappointed. I got some pictures though, and I wrote a trip report. Today, the bubbles had mostly stopped. The balloon had possibly grown a little bit since last time, but it was up long from days in the sun, or maybe from the gases inside, so it was hard to tell. The shit in the bottle was very settled, and it did not look like shit anymore even. I first lightly shook the bottle to make sure all the bubbles had popped. I then pitched off the balloon and took it off the top. I held that while I huffed from the bottle. After exhaling all air from my lungs, I took my straw and inhaled from the inside of the bottle. The flavor of shit struck me. It struck to my tongue like the flavor after smoking a cigar. My body wanted to stop breathing it, but I kept going by putting the end of the straw further back in my mouth, behind my tongue. I took in some more breaths of that, and I waited a few seconds, then inhaled the balloon. The balloon was less harsh. I could barely taste any of it, and it felt like breathing oxygen. After breathing it in, I immediately felt that I was passing out. I did not even have time to spit before I became unconscious. When I woke up, my spittle had oozed out of my mouth and down my chin. I asked my friend how long I was out for. He said for about a minute, and that he had repeatedly tried to wake me up, but I would not wake up. During this short conversation, I began to feel light dissociative effects come over me, accompanied by buzzing in my ears. The feeling got stronger and stronger until I felt like I was in a dream. This was somewhat enjoyable. It made me feel like nothing really mattered. The apathy actually made the rest of the trip more enjoyable. After I was fully into the dreamlike state, visual hallucinations began to start. I had fleeting visions of people who seemed completely random, like my second grade teacher. I would say something to the person, and then he or she would disappear. Normally, I would be fearful of trips like this, but the dream feeling made it almost fun. Hearing was dull during the trip. I could only hear what I was saying and some random noises, like screeching and car noises. After the effects wore off, my friend told me that I was mostly talking in gibberish, so I guess I couldn't hear my own voice or anything in the outside world throughout the trip. At the peak of the trip, I saw things like pillars in my lawn that disappeared in shapes in the sky. My sense of time was slowed, so the whole trip felt like it was shorter than it was. The countdown was mostly auditory hallucinations, like voices and loud cracks. The dreamlike feeling lessened, and I drifted back into reality. In the last parts of the trip, I became paranoid from the noises because it felt real instead of like a dream. I asked my friend how long it had been. He said about 40 minutes. He also told me that I spent long periods of time staring at different spots. I also, according to him, spoke slurred words to trees and rocks. I was very surprised by how messed up the Jenkem got me. That was higher than I have ever been. Other drugs distort reality, but Jenkem really distorts reality. My friend said that seeing me was scary, and he was thinking of getting an adult. Thank God he didn't do that. In conclusion, was it enjoyable? No, not really. Would I do it again? Defiantly not. Would I recommend another person to try it? I wouldn't to anyone who I am close to. If you are very adventurous and would try anything, then I guess you should try Jenkem. But know that the preparation is not made worthwhile by the trip.